They laughed like he couldn't hear them. Loud, sharp bursts of mockery echoing across the empty stadium stands, just barely muffled by the clinking of beer bottles being gathered into a plastic bin. He kept his head down, moving slow and steady, one gloved hand gripping a rusted grabber claw, the other holding a half-full trash bag that crinkled with each step. "Man, imagine ending up like that," one of them snorted, tipping back what was left of his drink. "All that college debt and you still gotta clean peanut shells at 10 p.m. Bet he's been working here since the place opened. Ain't no retirement plan in them overalls," another added, elbowing the guy beside him. "Let's get a selfie." With him. #goals. They laughed again, crueler this time, careless, loud in the way people get when they think someone is too old or too invisible to matter. But the man in the navy jumpsuit didn't say a word. He just kept working. The breeze carried the sharp scent of stale popcorn and spilled soda. Above them, the jumbo screen still glowed faintly with post-game stats. Fans had long since cleared out. So had the vendors, so had security. But the streetlights were still on. The corporate box rented out by Anderson and Worth Capital Group, a name with money but no manners. The oldest among them leaned back in his leather seat, still sipping bourbon like he owned the night. Honestly, they should put guys like that behind the building. It's bad optics. Ain't nobody trying to watch their future during a baseball game. That got a few nods, a few more laughs. Then one of them, the junior analyst trying too hard to impress, flung an empty hot dog wrapper at the man below. It missed, fluttered sideways, landed near the old man's feet. The man paused, just for a second, then bent down slowly and picked it up quietly, carefully, like he always had. But this time he straightened up slower, eyes lingering not on the trash but on the glowing skybox above. Just long enough. They didn't see his face, but they felt the look. It landed on them like a weight. Then he turned, disappearing down the ramp, dragging the trash bag behind him. No rush, no anger, just silence and heavy steps. Back in the suite, one of the younger men shifted in his chair. "We doing anything after this, or—" The eldest chuckled. "Nah, let's head back. I need to call Morris about next quarter. Projections." He reached for his phone only to see a text pop up from an unknown number. "We'll discuss projections in the morning. CL." He stared, eyes narrowing. "Wait. Who the hell is CL?" Another message buzzed through. "Check the deed." The suite lights suddenly dimmed, and for the first time all night no one laughed. The elevator ride down from the suite was unusually quiet. Cameron, the youngest in the group, tapped his phone, nervously. "Yo, you think that text was like a prank? Maybe security messing with us?" No one answered. Even Miles, the senior partner who never passed up a chance to talk down to someone, kept glancing at the elevator panel, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. They'd only been in town for a week. Anderson and Worth was scouting property near the stadium. The plan was simple. Charm the franchise owner into a buyout pitch, maybe secure naming rights to the surrounding blocks once development broke ground. Quick handshake deal. Bragging rights. At the next investor summit, but the owner had never shown. Their assistant said he was off-site, and they'd been hosted by a rotating cast of PR staff and operations managers. The suite? On the house. The drinks? Flowing. And the team? Lost 7-2 until that message. Check the deed. They spilled into the lobby, suits wrinkled, confidence cracked. Miles was the first to bark. "Call Tricia. Have her pull up the ownership. Ledger. I want names and holding companies now." Cameron opened his laptop, hands fumbling, the screen's glow lighting up his pale face in the dark parking lot. "Okay, so the stadium's managed under Leland Group LLC. That's not new." "And?" Miles barked. Cameron hesitated. "It's, the L stands for Charles Leland." Charles Leland? Miles repeated, slow. Why does that name sound familiar? The others stayed silent. Then Jordan, who'd been quiet the whole night, finally spoke. I think he was at the last League Owners Gala. Black guy. Real low profile. Nobody even knew he was in the room till he spoke. Said something about ownership being responsibility, not just real estate. Cameron turned the screen so the others could see. A newspaper clipping from the Tribune showed an older black man in a navy suit, barely smiling, standing at the construction site of the stadium 23 years ago. Leland to reinvest in city. Kids deserve a place to dream, says new owner. The caption burned into their retinas, and the face, same sharp cheekbones, same steady eyes. Just not in a suit tonight. You're telling me, Miles began, swallowing his own words. Jordan nodded. We laughed at the man who owns the field. Meanwhile, across the lot, the man in the jumpsuit tossed the last bag into the industrial dumpster. He peeled off the gloves, slow and tired. Not old, not weak, just deliberate. Like every step. Meant something. A young security guard nodded at him on his way out. Have a good night, Mr. Leland. He returned the nod. You too, son. Lock the south gate tight. I saw some kids trying to sneak in last week. Yes, sir. Charles stepped into his truck, not flashy, not brand new, and rolled down the window. For a moment he looked back at the sweet lights above. Then he smiled just a little and drove off into the night. Let them stew. He'd be seeing them in the morning. The next morning, the glass conference room on the 10th floor of the Leland Operations Building was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in mood. The Anderson and Worth delegation sat stiffly along one side of the long table, legal pads untouched, coffee cups half sipped. No more jokes. No more selfies, just silence. Tricia, the assistant they'd been brushing off all week, stood by the window checking her watch. She wasn't wearing her usual smile, just that calm, efficient stillness that came from knowing the people in front. Of her were about to learn something they should have known already. Mr. Leland will be with you shortly, she said. Miles tried to speak first. Listen, Tricia. But she was already walking away. The door clicked shut behind her, seconds stretched. Then the door opened again, and in walked the man from last night. Not in a jumpsuit this time, a crisp navy blue tailored suit. Grey pocket, square, clean boots polished to a muted shine, the same eyes, the same walk, but different, unmistakable. Charles Leland. He didn't sit right away, just stood at the head of the table and placed a black folder in front of him. Morning. They mumbled a return. No one met his eyes. He flipped open the folder. So you've been using my suite, drinking my bourbon, talking about my stadium, and mocking my staff. He paused, looking directly at Miles. Correction. Mocking me. A throat cleared. We didn't realize. No, Charles said simply. You didn't. The room froze. He closed the folder, then finally took his seat. I built this place from nothing, broke ground on it with a second-hand shovel and 3 investors who thought I was crazy. Everyone said a stadium on the south side was a bad idea. Too risky, not profitable, not safe. His voice didn't rise. He didn't need it to. But I didn't build this for profit. I built it so the kids here could watch something beautiful and believe they belonged in the world that made it. He leaned forward. And for the last week I've watched you treat this place like a throwaway. You called my people disposable, called me bad optics. His eyes shifted to Cameron, who looked down. So let's get one thing clear. He pushed a new folder across the table. Inside was a breakdown of the stadium's ownership, the surrounding real estate, and a deed with one name in bold ink, Charles Isaiah Leland. Every brick here has my fingerprint on it. Every contract goes through me. You want to invest? You. Speak with respect. You want naming rights? You start by learning mine. Silence. You could hear the HVAC hum. Then Charles smiled, small but with weight. You can finish your coffee now. Meeting's adjourned. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out the room with the same slow, deliberate pace he had the night before. No shouting, no gloating, just grace and fire. Behind him the men stayed seated, like boys who'd just been taught what real power sounds like. The silence after Charles Leland left the room felt heavier than shame. It was legacy. It was years of overlooking men like him, men who built quietly, men who owned without needing applause, men whose dignity didn't fit their assumptions, and... Now Miles sat hunched in the leather chair, one hand covering his mouth. He was staring at the folder like it had slapped him. Jordan, usually quick with charm, just kept blinking. He really was out there last night, picking up trash. He was watching, Cameron whispered. He heard everything. No one spoke after that. Downstairs, Charles stood by the stadium gates. Not for press, not for a speech, just because he always started his day there. At the iron archway with Leland Field stamped across the top. It hadn't always been named after him. He waited 15 years before accepting the honor, not because he didn't think he earned it, but because he knew the real work wasn't in having your name in lights. It was in making sure no one could erase it when you were gone. "Morning, Mr. Leland," said Darnell, one of the grounds crew. "Young. First year on the job." Charles nodded. "You staying for lunch again today?" "Yes, sir. Mama's dropping. Off my meal around noon." Charles smiled faintly. "Tell her I said thank you. She makes the best cornbread I've ever tasted." Darnell beamed like he'd just been knighted. That's what Charles understood. That the stadium wasn't a stage for money men or ego. It was a place where the invisible deserved to be seen, where the people who mopped the floors, sold the tickets, swept the bleachers were not just staff, they were part of the foundation. Upstairs, Tricia was sorting the post-meeting mess. She wasn't surprised. She'd seen this happen before, the way men in tailored suits underestimated Charles. They always saw the quiet as weakness, the humility as irrelevance, until they found themselves seated in a room where every file, every document, every square foot belonged to the man they thought was beneath them. She filed away the extra name tags they'd brought. Miles Harrow, Cameron Beale, Jordan Klein. All printed bold, all left slightly askew. In Charles's world, names meant something, and respect wasn't given for free. That afternoon, Charles met with a group of local high schoolers touring the stadium. He didn't tell them who he was at first. He just listened as their guide explained the field layout, the locker room tunnel, the press boxes. A girl with glasses asked how long it took to build the stadium. "Too long," the guide chuckled. "But I think the owner had a vision or something." Charles raised a brow. "Or something?" The guide laughed. "I mean, we think he still comes around sometimes, but no one ever sees him." The girl tilted her head. "What's his name?" Charles finally spoke. "Leland. Charles Isaiah Leland." "Do you know him?" she asked, eyes wide. He looked her right in the eyes, the corners of his mouth curling. "I know what he stands for." By Wednesday, the silence from Anderson and Worth was no longer embarrassment. It was panic. Miles had gone from arrogant strategist to a man scrambling to salvage face. What he didn't understand, what none of them had understood until now, was that Charles Leland didn't operate on their timeline. He wasn't interested in flashy deals or urgent calls. He wasn't some relic they could manipulate with fast money and buzzwords. He was watching, waiting, measuring. That morning, Tricia walked into Charles's office holding a silver envelope, another one from them. Charles didn't look up right away. He was marking up blueprints for a new community baseball program, outdoor lighting, lower bleachers for wheelchair accessibility, and a volunteer-run snack bar, the kind of things that didn't make headlines, but made lives. "They're persistent," he muttered. They're desperate, Tricia corrected. This one's labeled Private and Final Proposal. Charles set his pen down and opened the envelope. Inside was a glossy one-sheet presentation. Strategic Partnership Proposal, full capital buyout, bold font, no soul, the number at A. The bottom made Tricia blink. 37 million. And a seat on their board, Charles added, scanning the fine print. They want me to hand over everything and be their mascot. Tricia crossed her arms. You gonna reply? Charles folded the paper, calm and slow. I already did, Tricia smirked. Upstairs in the VIP conference wing, Miles received a small envelope hand-delivered by a Leland Field staff member. No security escort, no email heads-up. Just a man in maintenance green who said, "He said you'd understand." Inside was a single handwritten sentence on thick, cream-colored stationery. Respect isn't for sale. CL. Miles sat back, mouth dry. Jordan, read it over his shoulder. We really messed up, didn't we? Miles didn't answer, but the paper shook slightly in his hands. That night, Charles did what he always did after hours. He walked the stands, same slow steps, same route, row by row, section by section. Except this time there was someone waiting in the upper bleachers. Hoodie, backpack, eyes nervous. It was Darnell, the new grounds crew kid. Charles stopped at the end of the row. Are you forget something? Darnell stood sheepish. Nah, Mr. Leland, I just wanted to say something. Charles nodded, letting him. My mama saw you on the news a few years back. Said you bought this place for people like me, even when people said it was stupid. And I didn't believe it at first, but now I see it. You're out here always. Charles raised an eyebrow. You thought the papers made it up? I thought people like you stopped showing up once they got money. Charles's smile didn't come easy, but it came. He put a hand on Darnell's shoulder. I didn't build this so I could disappear. Later that week, the new field signs were installed. No more corporate suite branding, no plaques for temporary donors, no logo for Anderson and Worth, just a quote, printed bold in white on the brick archway. Leave a legacy that don't need a signature. Charles Leland, the next board meeting at Anderson and Worth was behind closed doors. No press, no cameras. Just panic in tailored suits. Miles stood at the head of the long walnut table, red-faced and speaking too fast. We underestimated him, he admitted, hands clenched on the polished wood. And now he's turned us into a cautionary tale. The room of shareholders and senior partners said nothing at first. They all knew the headlines were coming. Charles Leland was no longer just a quiet name on a deed. He had become a symbol. Worse than rejection was embarrassment. Worse than embarrassment was irrelevance. He controls the stadium, the land around it. 3 high-rise parcels we didn't even clock in due diligence, said Rebecca Cho, head of acquisitions, and now the neighborhood views him like a saint. Another partner leaned back in his seat. Why didn't we know any of this? Cameron, sitting further down the table, muttered, because nobody ever bothered to Google him until he picked up a soda can. Meanwhile, in the Leland Field community room, a different kind of meeting was underway. Charles stood at the front, no suit this time. Just his soft grey sweater and rolled sleeves. The room was full. Teachers, barbers, teen athletes, retired neighbors, all volunteers, all seated with clipboards and dreams. We're adding tutoring programs in the off-season, he told. Them. College prep, mentorship, not just for kids who play, for every child in this zip code who thinks nobody sees them. A woman raised her hand. What about meals? Some of the kids only eat if school is open. Charles nodded. Already. Budgeted. Evening meals, take-home bags, no charge. Cheers, applause, a few tearful grins. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make speeches. He just built, block by quiet block, a world where people like him weren't erased. Back at Anderson and Worth, damage control wasn't going well. Their PR team drafted a statement apologizing for the misunderstanding and praised Charles's commitment to the community. He declined to comment, but 1 week later the Tribune ran a front-page story. The man they never researched. How one billionaire's silence spoke louder than corporate arrogance. The article painted a picture of a man who rose from the sun, of a steelworker to owning one of the city's largest private stadiums, without ever hosting a press conference, without buying billboards, without begging for handshakes in boardrooms. His secret: he never needed to be seen. Only respected. The next home game was sold out, but this time fans didn't chant the team name as the first pitch was thrown. They chanted one word: Leland. From the stands to the dugouts to the box seats, where executives used to laugh too. Loud, the name echoed like justice in the rafters. And Charles? He stood in the shadows behind Section 204, hands in his pockets, cap pulled low, watching, as always. Friday night. Spotlights swept across the packed stadium. The scoreboard glowed. A soft breeze rustled the flags. And for the first time in years, Leland Field didn't just feel full, it felt alive. Down near the dugout, school kids in brand-new uniforms sat with stars in their eyes. A marching band from the Southside tech magnet had just rapped the anthem, and the claps still lingered in the warm night air. Charles Leland stood quietly behind the maintenance gate near third base, hidden in plain sight. Dressed the same way. He always did when he wanted to blend in. Dark polo, slacks, old ball cap. Just another man watching a game. But he wasn't just watching tonight. He was listening. Inside the luxury suite once labeled Anderson and Worth Premier Box, something had changed. Gone were the monogrammed Scotch tumblers. Gone were the private waitstaff. The sleek modern decor had been replaced with warm mahogany shelves filled with framed photos, kids shaking hands after t-ball games, a teenage pitcher mid-throw, a grandmother hugging a player during family day. A small brass plaque sat on the table near the window, reserved for community use only by order of C.I. Leland. The suite was no longer available to rent, not for Wall Street, not for lobbyists, not even for the mayor. Tonight it was full of Little League coaches, bus drivers, cafeteria staff, all invited by name, and none of them knew they were being watched. By the man who'd put their names on the list himself. In the upper corner of the stadium, the former executives of Anderson and Worth sat on plastic bleachers. Section 310. No cushions. No wine, just hot dogs and awkward silence. Miles adjusted his shirt collar again, then again, as if it'd get more comfortable. They didn't even comp us seats, he muttered. Why would they? Jordan replied. We're lucky we didn't get banned. Cameron stared straight ahead. We thought we were the story. They sat in a row, not one of them speaking as the crowd suddenly erupted in applause. Down on the jumbotron, a video began to play, softly lit images of kids training, staff cleaning, community nights, graduation ceremonies held on the field. At the end, in gold lettering over a shot of the stadium's original blueprints, he built it for all of us. And he never left. And then his name. Charles I Leland, founder, builder, custodian, owner. The camera panned through the crowd, and in one accidental sweep, caught Charles himself for just a second, still in the shadows, still near Section 204, still standing. Down near the first baseline, Darnell sat with his mother. She clutched his hand, overwhelmed. That's him, ain't it? Mr. Charles? Darnell nodded. Yeah, that's him. You told him thank you. Not yet, he said softly. But I will. And somewhere high above the noise and the lights, Charles turned his head slightly. He didn't wave, didn't bow, but something in his stillness said, This is what legacy looks like. The sun had set, but Leland Field still hummed with life. Vendors rolled carts toward the back gates. Parents rounded up sticky-fingered kids, and high school players lingered near the fence, tossing balls back and forth like the game never ended. It hadn't, not really. Not here, not tonight. Charles Leland stood beneath the overhang of Section 204, arms resting on the rail. He could hear his father's voice in the wind, gravel tough and tired from decades in the steel mill. Build. Something they can't bulldoze, not just with your hands, with your name. He'd never carved his name in stone. He'd carved it in people. In the kid who used to sneak into games and now taught third grade down the block. In the janitor who became head of stadium ops after being seen when others looked past. In the boy who once got caught tagging the walls and now painted murals on them for a living. He never bragged. He just made sure no one else got erased like they once tried to erase him. At the exit, Darnell stood with his mother, hesitating, then stepped forward. "Mr. Leland." Charles turned, nodding slightly. "Yes, son. I just wanted to say thank you for the job, the food drives, the field, all of it." Charles gave a soft smile. "You're welcome." Darnell looked down. "I was embarrassed when I didn't know who you were that first week. Thought you were just a quiet old man picking up trash." Charles chuckled, eyes kind. "I was. But why?" Darnell asked. Charles stepped forward, his voice steady. "Because power that needs to be seen ain't real power, and respect that only shows up in a suit is just decoration. I pick up what people leave behind, because I know what it feels like to be left there." He placed a hand on Darnell's shoulder. "Don't ever let anyone make you small to feel big. And don't ever walk past a mess like it's not your job. Legacy ain't loud, it's what stays when you leave." Darnell blinked, trying not to tear up. Charles pulled his cap lower and walked toward the employee gate, same as always. 3 weeks later, a small bronze statue appeared outside the main entrance of Leland Field. It wasn't of a man in a suit. It wasn't even on a pedestal. It was Charles in a jumpsuit holding a trash bag in one hand and pointing gently toward the bleachers with the other, like he was showing you where to sit, like he'd saved you a seat. The plaque read, "Charles. I, Leland owner, custodian, builder of fields, builder of people." He never left, he just stood back and watched us rise.